DreAllDay.com.
You are now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, yes, there is more. You get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves me, you, him, her, them, and they. And I was saying that before, the whole pronouns thing came around. To go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. We put all this together into one bundle, one package, one philosophy, one method, one mindset, one book, one daily masterclass that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is point story application. This is a framework for sharing anything. Now, I just told you in yesterday's episode that I soon had a masterclass coming on this exact topic. So if you didn't know what I meant when I say soon, now you know, okay? So point story application is a three-part framework that you can use, as I touched on yesterday, for getting your point across. And again, the point is the first thing, but the story and the application also matter as well. As I get into this explanation, you will understand that. So this can be used for a wide range of communications. So you can use this in written format, you can use this verbally, you can use this for a quick point that you're making. Let's say if you're on a panel with 7 other people and not everybody can speak for 10 minutes, you get like 2 minutes or even less than that to make your point and then move on, or you get invited to be on TV. You can't go for 3 minutes straight. You get maybe 30 seconds to make your point, and it might be the only chance you get to talk. And if you don't jump in and say something, you won't get a chance to speak up. Or any of you watch the Democratic or the Republican debates leading up to like the presidential elections, when that election cycle starts, and it's like 10 people who still think they have a chance to win the Democratic or the Republican ticket, and it's like 10 of them on a panel at the same time. If you don't learn to jump in there aggressively and then make your point, maybe tell a quick story, and then the application of the point, nobody's going to remember that you were there. Nobody is going to get any benefit from your presence. You won't benefit from your presence there. You probably won't have enough votes. You won't be polling high enough, and all that money that you raised and all the time you invested goes completely to waste, and you don't even get a chance to get close to running for president. All because you didn't understand first of all, the aggression that you need to when you're jumping in with a bunch of people like that, and just how to make your point in a very quick way. Also understand that this point story application framework can be applied even in long form talking. You can use point story application. If you read my book, Work on Your Game, if you read my book, The Mirror of Motivation, if you read my book, The Overseas Basketball Blueprint, you read any of the books that I've written, point story application. I do it over and over and over again. I tell you the point. I give you a quick anecdote or story. I might go along with the anecdote or story depending on what it is. And then I tell you how to use it. I tell you why I'm telling you this and what it's going to do for you and how you can use this moving forward, even though you didn't go through the experience that I went through. On this show, I do it all the time. The point is the title of the episode. The story or whatever I tell you in between. When I give you, before we get to our first point, I usually explain to you why we're talking about this. That is a story in itself. And then I'll give you anecdotes and actual stories in the midst of making my points. And I'll tell you how to actually use these things. When I give a keynote speech, this is exactly what I do. I tell you, here's the point. Here's the first thing I want you to understand. We're going to talk about confidence. And I tell you a little story about confidence. Then I tell you how to use the story. Even though, again, you're not the person who went through the story. Even if the story is from business and I'm talking to athletes, or the story is about sports and I'm talking to business people, I tell you how you can apply it, even though the story is not directly about the same, is not a direct parallel to exactly what you're doing. So point story application is a framework that you can use to get any knowledge or communication across to any audience once you grasp the framework and you have some actual substance to use within the framework. So if you don't have a point, then you can't use point story application. If you don't have any good stories to share, then you can't use point story application. If you don't know how the experiences that you've gone through and or the knowledge that you have acquired can be used by someone else, then you can't use point story application. So in other words, to use point story application, you must have a fucking point that you want to make. You must have some useful, memorable stories that you can tell. And you must have an application of your information. In other words, you got to be able to tell other people how they can use what you know. We call that teaching or coaching or mentorship. If you don't know how to explain to people how they can use your knowledge, then you don't have an application of your information, and you probably shouldn't talk too much, all right, until you figure that out. Now, I can help you with that. Just listen to this show. I've done plenty of episodes talking about it. All that being said, let's get into this framework here. Again, you already know what the 3 points are going to be here today. I already told you, point, story, application. Number 1, point. People like points. You know why people like points? Because it makes it easy to follow what you're saying. On this show right here, that many people have told me this, and I know that people like it, and it even makes it easier for me, because every episode of this show, I tell you, I might not always say that I have 3 points or 4 or 6 points, but I always give you the points. I say, all right, here's point number 1, and then I talk about it. Here's point number 2, here's point number 3, and then when I'm done, what do? I recap the 3 points. Here's point 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we put them in the show notes. So right now, as you're listening to this, you can scroll down wherever you're listening, and you can see the points. You can see them before I even say them. You can even fast forward to them. If you don't want to hear the first point, you can fast forward to the second point and hear whatever I'm going to say there. Points make it easy for people to follow. This is why bullet points or numbered list or unordered list, as they say in typing, the reason why they're so popular and why they are built into every word processor is because they make information easy to follow. If I say, I have 5 things I'm going to share with you here today. Number 1, I'm going to talk about discipline. Number 2, confidence. Number 3, mental toughness. Number 4, personal initiative. Number 5, who knows, I may throw a wild card in there, strategy, something like that. I tell you that I have 5 points. Now you know where I'm at. When I get to point number 3, you know that there's only 2 more after that. So you know the framework that I'm giving you up front. So it creates a sense also of anticipation when you tell people that you have a certain number of points. And it's a lot easier to follow than just raw dialogue. If someone just comes up and just starts talking, that's a lot harder to follow than if they tell you, hey, I got 4 points I'm gonna share with you here today. Here's point number 1. All right, then they say, all right, you got point number 1, here's point number 2, here's point number 3. That's much easier for people to follow because understand, not everybody's as smart as you. Now that doesn't mean you have to do it that way. I've seen people give speeches where they just get up on the stage and just start talking and they're amazing. For some people it works that way, but for me, and if you've been listening to this show for any amount of time, I think you can tell this is what works for me. This is what's comfortable for me, is to give the points so that it's also easy for me to organize in my mind. So when I'm giving a speech, I don't have to remember everything I was going to say. All I got to remember is my 3 points or my 5 points. And all I got to do while I'm talking, all right, I gave point 1. All right, here's point 2. Here's point 3. Here's point 4. I already know what goes within. I already know the context of each point. All I got to remember is the points. And then I can just go off the top off of that. It's not really off the top. I've prepared ahead of time, but I don't need slides. I don't need notes. I don't have note cards. I don't need a podium, any of that, because I already know what is going within. So when I do keynotes, that's exactly what I do. I tell people, look, I'm gonna share with you 5 principles, or I'm gonna give you 3 points, or I'm gonna tell you 4 stories. And then that's exactly what I do. And everybody knows exactly what's gonna happen. So when I finish point number 2, you know, since I told you I'm gonna have 5, you know I got 3 more to go. Sometimes we wanna know when things will be over. You know why? Because people have short attention spans these days. The attention spans are just getting shorter and shorter due to all the instantaneousness of the applications that we use. We can entertain ourselves at the touch of a button. So if you are going and going, again, you're violating the skill of verbal brevity like we talked about yesterday, and people don't know when you're going to be done, they'll eventually just tune you out. And the worst thing is for you to be sharing something, but people are not actually listening. So it's easier to remember when I tell you I have 3 points than if I just talk at you for 30 minutes, even though I may be saying the exact same thing. So that's why points work. Now, again, I'm not telling you have to have points, but this is an argument for why. I'm making a case for why you may want to start using points when you are saying things. If you're jumping into a conversation with someone, let's use Clubhouse as the app. Again, another example. You jump into Clubhouse and you want to challenge something that has been said so far in the room. You say, well, look, I got 3 things that I want to say. And then you say your 3 things. Number 1 is this, number 2 is this, and number 3 is this. Instead of just getting in there and just start talking, because it makes it, again, harder for people to understand. Just giving those points, those bullets, make it easier for other human beings to organize what you said in their minds. And for the most part, it makes it easier for you to organize what you're saying in your own mind. And that lends to brevity. So you can actually make your point and then shut the hell up. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is the point story application framework for communicating any information, ideas, whatever you want to share with other people. Number 2 is telling a story. Human beings, I talked about this yesterday. Human beings are wired to follow and internalize narrative. We remember stories. It's very hard to remember information. We remember some information, but we forget most of it. How many of you can remember the stuff that you learned in class in college or in high school, even though you passed college and you graduated from high school, you graduated college and you graduated from high school, you got a degree. Can you remember the stuff that you were taught, the information? Probably not, but you can probably remember a bunch of stories from both of those experiences. Why is this? Because you're human and human beings are wired to remember stories. This is why you need to use them. This is why they say that facts tell, but stories sell. And this is what I tell people anytime they're going to give it any type of presentation, whether they're talking a keynote speech, if you're doing a podcast, or you just want to get a point across to other people, give a story that shares the point, a story that supports the point, a story that sets up the point, something narrative based. Why? Because first of all, it's easier for you to remember. Second of all, stories take up a good amount of time. So anytime I'm giving a speech, if I'm giving a keynote speech and it's 60 minutes long, there are very few people out there who can give a 60-minute speech chock full of information with no story whatsoever and maintain the attention of your audience. Now, I think there are a few exceptions. So if you're in a very technologically or very data-heavy industry, such as like the medical industry or anything really super tech-based or science or things like that, medicine, and events like that, when someone's giving a speech and it's a 60-minute speech, it's usually all information and the people in the audience, they are super information thirsty type of individuals. They can listen to that stuff. Me, I will fall the hell asleep listening to information for 60 minutes straight. But if you tell me 60 minutes of stories and they're good stories, I will listen. And most of you, I think, fit that same description. So even though I give you a ton of information, even when I'm talking here, I also add the narrative in with it. So have your facts, have your information, the points that you want to get across to people, but add the stories in. And again, the reason why I brought up story, because story takes up a good amount of time in a speech. So given a 60-minute speech, 45 of my 60 minutes are of stories. 45 of my 60 minutes, I'm telling stories. 75% of my talking, I'm giving you the narrative. Why? Because that's what you'll remember. And now after I've given you the narrative, I have your attention, and in that little window, I'm gonna tell you the point, and I'm gonna tell you how to use it. So 25% of my time, I'm giving you the point that follows the narrative and what you can actually do with that information. All right, that's the quote unquote value that they're paying for, but what they're really getting is the entertainment of the whole presentation. As a general rule, speeches devoid of stories usually suck. Now again, there are exceptions. If you're in the medical field, technological field, science field, then it can be a little bit different. I'm not in those fields. I'm in the personal development, professional development field, work on your game field. I gotta tell you some type of narrative so you can remember what the hell I'm saying. The phrase TMI, everybody knows what that means, right? Too much information. You know why that phrase exists? Because people share information with no narrative. See, you could give me 30 seconds worth of information and it can be TMI simply because I'm not going to remember it. It's too much when I can't remember it. That's what makes it too much. Too much does not mean the length of the information. Too much means the style in which the information is delivered. If I can't remember it, you're giving me too much information. If I can remember it, you can give me an hour's worth of information if you're giving me an hour's worth of story. And I'm learning the information in between the lines of the story that you're telling. You understand? That's why fables exist. Aesop's fables, where they tell you these stories and you kind of get the point of what they're trying to communicate to you without them even being explicit. But the story could be 10 pages long, but the story is what you're following. But you're getting the information at the same time that you're getting the story. That's a skill, people. That is not something that just happens randomly. That's a skill that you can develop. If you want to be a good speaker who can captivate and entertain an audience, and I'm assuming that you do, and you should want to be this. If you don't, then you should add this to your list of ambitions. Gather stories and get good at telling them. I shall repeat. If you want to be a good speaker who can captivate and entertain an audience, gather stories and get good at telling them. Now, whatever age you are, if you're listening to me right now, you have stories. Right? You have experiences. Even if you don't think your life is that exciting, you've seen stories, you've heard stories, you've seen stuff that other people have gone through. Borrow those stories. Curate the stories. Find the best stories, the best anecdotes that support your points, and use them to support your points, to set up the application of what you're sharing. Yesterday I told you a story about Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. It's not my story. It's not my experience. It's something that I saw and heard and know about. So what did I do? I used it to support my point and to set up the application of what I was trying to tell you. Now, again, you might not even have remembered the application or the point, but you remember the story. They don't even have to be your stories, as I said. My speeches usually anywhere from 50 to 80% of my speeches are 50 to 80% story, and the rest of it is information. And understand that a lot of times I'm not even telling my own stories. Maybe half of my stories will be about something that I actually experienced, and the other half will be stuff that other people went through. I borrow other people's stories. I don't want the whole speech to be about me. Only a select few people will remember facts. Everybody, always keep that in mind. Everybody remembers a story though. And as a note, sometimes your story can be the point itself and you won't even have to spell it out. It depends on the context. Now me, I'm the type of person who likes to spell things out to make sure you know exactly what I'm saying, but not everybody has that style. Some people will just tell you a story and just leave it at that and let you figure it out. Now you gotta be careful, you gotta read the room as to when it's okay to do this and when it's not, because some audiences may not be advanced enough to understand. They may not be advanced enough to read between the lines. So sometimes you gotta read between the lines for them. So make sure you're reading the room and know who your audience is when you do that. And point number 3, today's topic once again is point story application, a 3-part framework for communicating any information to any audience. Number 3, application. Now you gotta tell people the use of the point and story. All right, you gave me your point, you told me your story. Why does this matter? Why do I care? What can I do or should I do with what you just shared with me? How will my life be different because of it? How will I as a person be different because of it? Teachers, professional speakers, consultants, coaches, podcasters. All right, this is the part you get paid for, the application. All right, because the reason why the application is what you get paid for, even though they're getting the point in the story as well, is because the application is where the change actually happens. The application is what everyone in that audience does after the conference, after your keynote speech, after they watch your live Zoom virtual presentation, after they listen to your podcast, after they read your book. Did they do anything different? Did their life change in any way? Did they change any of their habits? Did they get rid of anything that wasn't working? Did they make an advancement that can become a case study or a testimonial for you? How did they apply what you shared? It is your job to explicitly let them know, here's what you do next. And the better you are at doing this and getting people to actually do it and follow through and do things differently, then the bigger your name becomes, the bigger your reputation grows, and probably the more money you're going to end up making and charging. Now, this part of the application, this can be your branded intellectual property. This could be a framework that you yourself have created. It could be the book that you're selling, the course that you have, etc. But this is you sharing with people how they actually use what they have heard. Understand the application is what creates satisfied consumers, case studies, and testimonials, as I just said a moment ago. But you have to spell it out for them. Tell them, all right, here's what you do next. Here's what you do with this. Step 1, step 2, step 3. What am I giving you there? Points. Here's the first point. Here's the second thing you do. Here's the third thing you do. And then here's how you let me know about it. All right, make sure you're gathering that information. Get the credit. All right, so the application part is where the rubber meets the road. This is the personal initiative. All right, this is where you actually go and make things happen instead of just taking in information or waiting for things to happen. This is where now we need to go do something with all this information that we just took in. All right, everybody following me so far? Of course you are, because this is a point story application. Point number 4, topic once again today, point story application, a 3-part framework for sharing, communicating any information with any audience. Number 4, this is what I use. I've already pretty much given this point away already, but this is what I use in every episode of this podcast / masterclass. This is what I use in my keynote speeches. I use this in my live streams. I use this in the videos I make. I use this for the courses that I create. I make a point. Oftentimes I'll add a little story or anecdote, and then I'll tell you how to use it. Simple as that. That's all that I do. I just gave you my entire business structure right there. Make a point, give you a little story or anecdote, and then I'll tell you how to use it. That's it. If you can learn how to do that, you can build a business. You can help other people. You can help change other people's lives. You can start by changing yours, and you can help change other people's lives. If you learn the point story application framework and you have some substance within, you have some substance with which you can insert into the framework. Now, what about that substance part? Let's talk about that, because I did 2 episodes on substance, if you didn't guess. Episode number 1620, the style and substance mix for audience building. You need a little bit of both. And in episode number 1286, how to be a person of substance. How do you actually have some substance so that you have something you can insert into the point story application framework? So you don't have anything you can't give. You can't give what you don't have, folks. So this is all that I do. And if you really start looking at what other people do, you'll notice that many experts, many coaches, many consultants, many people who are known for really knowing their stuff, this is all they do. They create a framework, they tell you the point, they tell you a little story to illustrate it, and then they tell you how to use it. All right, go grab your favorite book, look through it. I guarantee you're going to see this framework over and over again. Listen to your favorite podcast, or you already listened to your favorite podcast. Listen to your second favorite podcast. You're going to see this over and over and over again. Point story application. Next time you go to a conference or you are attending a live virtual event, you're going to see it. Point story application. Master this in your area of knowledge, and you can share your game with anyone and everyone. And when you get really good at it, you can start charging more and more money for it. Let's recap today's class, which is point story application, a framework for sharing anything. Number 1, the point. People like points because it's easy to follow, much easier to follow than just raw talking, and it creates a sense of anticipation. When I do my presentations, I tell people I have points I'm going to share, or even if I don't tell you, I tell you when I'm saying it. Here's point 1, here's point 2, here's point 3. Point number 2, story. Humans are wired to follow an internalized narrative. This is why facts can tell, but stories are what sell because we can remember them. They touch our emotions. People make decisions based on emotion. We do not make decisions based on logic. We justify with logic. That's why you do need the facts, but you use the story to really hook people in. People make their buying decisions based on how they emotionally feel, not on the logical, rational facts of a situation. So this is why you see a lot of people driven off emotion and not really making any sense, because that's exactly how it works. Emotions are not supposed to make sense, and facts are not supposed to drive people's emotions. They are 2 separate things. Rare is the individual who can master both. Point number 3, application. What is the use of your point/story? What can/should the listener do with it? How will their lives be different? How will they be different? You're a teacher, a speaker, consultant, a coach. This is what you get paid to do. Your branded IP, your framework, your book, your course is all about showing people how they can apply what you have already shared with them. The better you get at this, the more satisfied consumers you will have under your belt. Number 4, this is what I use. Every episode of this show, every speech I give, every live stream, every video, every course, all I do is make a point. I tell you the story, and I tell you how to apply it. Read your favorite book. They do it. Listen to your favorite podcaster, your second favorite podcaster that is. I'm number 1. They do it. Go. Anybody who is out there known for their intellectual property, meaning taking knowledge that they have acquired or organized and sharing it with an audience, they do this over and over and over again. If you go look around, you will notice this in everything you consume. Point, story, application. So the point is, this is the framework. The story is, I just told you how to use it. And the application is work on your game. Dre all day.